Welcome to Pushing the Limits, the show that helps you reach your full potential, with your host, Lisa Tamati. Brought to you by lisatamati.com.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This week I have Anne Audain. Now, Anne Audain is, of course, one of New Zealand's top female runners. She has been 6 times qualified for the Olympics, world record holder. She's incredibly successful in both marathons and shorter distances. Back in the early 80s, was just unbeaten in America with all the road races that she ran. And she was a real pioneer of women's professional sport. So I hope you enjoy this interview with the amazing Anne Audain. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today I have the amazing legend of the running sport, Anne Audain. Anne, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you here.
And it's great to meet you too.
You are sitting in Indiana. You've made your home in the States. Why are you not in New Zealand?
Oh, I wish. Well, of course, in the last few years, we can't even get there. So that's kind of put a stop to all that. But I've pretty much come back every year through all these years. I've been in the States 40 years now, and I miss New Zealand. But it's where my sport and life took me. And so, you got to take everything that comes at you. I took a chance on, coming here to run way back 40 years ago, and here I am.
And here you are today, still happy and healthy in Indiana. Always reminds me of Indiana Jones.
Yep.
So, Anne, I want to go diving into your story because it's quite a remarkable story. I mean, you've been showered with accolades for your amazing running career. You've won more road races than I think any other athlete back in the day. You've qualified for the Olympics 6 times. You've done all these incredible things. And I'll let you tell your story in your words. But it didn't all start out roses. Can you take us back to a little bit to your, the troubles you had in your childhood?
Well, I was given up for adoption by a teenage mum, and when it came time, I was a baby, and when it came time for me to start walking, my parents noticed I didn't exactly use my feet real well, but of course, child can't exactly explain everything that's going on. To put it simply, I walked on my heels. I wouldn't go forward on my toes. And as I grew, some bone deformities grew on the front part of my feet. And the doctors told my parents that they weren't going to consider surgery until I was a teenager and my bones were strong enough to take the necessary surgery. And so all through my childhood, it was very painful, and I didn't walk correctly, and I couldn't wear proper shoes. And so when I was 13 years old, they put me into Middlemore Hospital. And the orthopedic surgeons told my parents that all they really wanted was to help me to walk better. And so they did surgery and took away all the excess bone, transplanted tendons to my big toes. Wow. And really the genius of them, which I don't think, many doctors here in the United States would actually risk, was that when it came time to leave the hospital, they didn't give me crutches or a wheelchair. They created, I always joke that I'm probably the one that had those orthopedic boots that they have now. I was the first. So the surgeon, they created a black leather boot to attach to the plaster casts. And on the bottom of the black leather boot, they had a wooden rocker, like a rocking horse. Yeah. So their idea was that when I walked out of that hospital on those boots with feet that had not healed.
Wow.
And what their goal was to push me forward. As my feet, they forced me forward because they thought my memory of walking on my heels and very pigeon-toed would not go away. So unless they forced me forward, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yes, it does make a lot of sense. And they gave me my running style. I mean, when those casts came off, it was easier to run than it was to walk.
Wow, because you were able to put, because I have a mum who's had an aneurysm, and we've been dealing with a stroke and aneurysm, and she cannot roll her foot, and she has drop foot, and the foot is stiff on the left side, and she won't push off. And it's really hard to retrain your brain when your brain is saying no. It's not how it's done.
Yeah. And as a youngster, you've spent all your life walking a certain way. They just didn't believe that even no amount of rehab would force me forward if I didn't do it, or if they didn't force me forward. And they did. Yeah.
Wow. So that made you push off nicely.
Yes.
And how long did it take for you to so you got the boots off, and then you just basically said, it was easier for you to run than to walk because you had that rocker when you were leaning forward. I suppose you're in that position to and so you ran everywhere.
Yeah, I did, and I joined the Audain Athletic Club in South Auckland because New Zealand system is all the club system, and all my neighbours, the kids at school, the neighbourhood kids, all belong to the Audain Athletic Club, and so I just told my parents I wanted to join it too, and so I just joined the Audain Athletic Club 1 year later, 1 year at age 14, and so I joined, and of course back then, girls were only allowed to run as far as a quarter mile, the young girls. So, I tried everything. I tried long jumping and high jumping, and was pretty fearful with that because I didn't exactly want to land hard on new feet. But I found that I loved to run and ran the 100, 200, 400 meters. And a person from the club entered me in the Auckland senior 800 meter champs when I was 14 years of age, and I finished third in the senior championships.
Wow.
And that's when my first coach, who was coaching at the Audain Athletic Club, asked me to join the squad that he had, and that's where it all started.
Wow. And so women back then, this is what year, sort of year, or what,
70s.
1970s. And so and girls in athletics clubs weren't even allowed to go more than a quarter of a mile.
Yeah.
Like that's girls. Even worse. That's
Well, the longest distance, when I began running, the longest distance in the Olympic Games for women was 800 meters.
Wow.
They put
insane.
They put the 1500 meters into Munich in 1972.
Wow, that's crazy. I had I'm friends with Catherine Switzer. You probably know Catherine. And the 1968, her going in the marathon, being told basically, back then that your uterus would fall out if you're a woman and you couldn't run a marathon. And now, of course, ultra marathon runners run hundreds of kilometers and nothing's fallen out yet.
No.
And so it's, in a short space of time, women's athletics has changed drastically. And you're actually a big part of that, really, in a number of ways, which I hope to dig into today. But tell us about progressing from there. So you were obviously talented, like genetically, you must have had some brilliance, like as far as your speed and that went. Did your birth parents, who you got to know later on, I believe, were they genetically gifted at all? What was the story
Not
there?
in terms of nothing. Nobody in the family did athletics. They were dairy farmers in the Waikato. I have 6 siblings, full siblings, because my birth parents married each other a year after I was born. So I have 6 younger brothers and sisters, and it was a farming family. And so they didn't participate in sports as such. And, I would say that my birth father was Dutch and just a real strong, hardy Dutchman. But no, I mean, they didn't.
Yeah.
Obviously there was genetics there, but they didn't realize it.
And you're the only one in the family to have gone into a career like this.
Yes.
And so tell us about your progression then through your early years and coming into, some of the major league stuff.
Well, let's see. I think the beauty of New Zealand is, compared to here in the United States, is we're more free to do what we want in terms of sport. Here, I would never have been given the chances to do what I did in regards just being able to step into those senior races and race against senior women. And so I started racing cross country in the senior races at age 14 and 15. At age 15, I won the New Zealand Road Championships in the senior category. And Auckland versus Waikato, I would race against the senior women And then in 72, I was 16 years of age, and I raced in the New Zealand Championships in the 1500 meters, and actually ran a time that was the Olympic qualifying standard to go to Munich.
Wow.
And I was chosen in the team, but was pulled out with 3 weeks to go because they considered I was too young. And that's probably correct. And so yes, every dream is to go to the Olympic Games, and you can always look back and say, that might have been my one and only chance. But in some respects, when you remember the Olympic Games and the massacre of the Israeli athletes in the Olympic Village, the New Zealand team was housed right by the Israeli athletes.
Wow.
And so they were pretty traumatized by that. And so as a 16-year-old, it's a good thing I didn't go. Absolutely. And then at age 17, I got selected to go in the New Zealand cross-country team to the World Championships in Belgium. And I finished 9th in the World Championships at 17 years of age. Great. So you're right. I mean, I kind of got, pretty good sight into the fact that I did have a talent. And from then on, it was finishing high school, going to teachers college, becoming a school teacher, representing New Zealand again in 75, 77, 79, 81 in the world cross country. We only went every alternate year because of finances. They couldn't afford to send a cross country team every year. Mm-hmm. So I had all of that and went to Montreal in 1976 at age 20. It was my first year of school teaching, which was in Otara in South Auckland. And I went in the 800 and 1500 meters. And by that point, I was New Zealand record holder and won the New Zealand championships in 800 and 1500 meters. So you could say the first 11 years of my career was done as an amateur, as a school teacher, representing New Zealand many, many times. So what I was getting out of my sport then was a whole bunch of world travel for free. Yeah. Which was absolutely amazing. Yeah. But who knew where it was all going to go? So I split my career into, it was a 22-year career, 11 years as an amateur, and then things could have gone backwards or forwards. Yes. And
this is interesting. Yeah. So you took a bit of a stand, because this was very, like the amateur rulings and stuff back then were very, very, very strict. And I remember, growing up and knowing, what amateur and professional was. And so you took a bit of a stand in one of your races and actually took some prize money. And that sort of pioneered the way, really. Was that a really difficult decision for you to make to do that?
Well, what's interesting is there's a documentary finally being made this year here in the States about that year, which was 1981. Mm-hmm. And I had left New Zealand with my first husband, and we were going to go to England and see, what we were going to do in England. He wanted to go and work in England again. And so I got my airfare to England by getting into that New Zealand cross-country team to go to Madrid in March of 1981. So I had no intentions of any future in the sport. I took it that this was it, and I got my airfare paid for, and we were going to stay in England, and Lord knows what I was going to do. So while I was there, Rod Dixon was in the team with us, and he said to me, because Dick Quacks and Rod had already been on the United States road racing circuit for about 2 years. And Lorraine Moller had gone there too and had run a marathon, I believe, or maybe 2 marathons. And so Rod said to me, Annie, you should go to the States and you really should try the road racing, because he says, I think that's going to be your niche. You got to try those middle distance. You got to go to those distances. And so I thought, okay, why not? So came to the United States, and Dick Quacks got me into a 10K down in New Orleans. And we fly into New Orleans, and this is kind of a cute story. So I I arrive at the airport and I get picked up by a limousine and get taken to this fancy hotel, and I'd never seen a hotel room like it. And I thought, my Lord, it's like, who do they really think I am? In other words, this is how they treat runners in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, really? And they said, well, we need you to come down to the press conference. So I go downstairs and there's a big room set up and a table's up the front with all the microphones. And I just go sit in the audience. Like, okay, I'll come to the press conference. Oh, no. You need to be up there with the other athletes. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. So I go up there and I think, well, maybe it's just because I'm a New Zealander. And so, you know, an international field, in other words, they got a New Zealander up here. So there was Bill Rogers, Frank Shorter. I mean, good Lord, I'll say names that these days a lot of people won't even know. Joan Benoit Samuelson, Jackie Gareau, who had just won Boston. So great fields.
Yeah.
And I got myself on the end of the table, and they started at the other end asking questions and interviewing. And then remembering that Dick Quacks had got me into this race. So then they get to me, and the MC says, well, you've run an amazing time for a 10K. What do you think you're going to do tomorrow? Well, I'd never run 10K in my life. And I never ran, this is going to be my first 10K. And I was quick enough to realize that Dick had probably told them that I'd raced a 10K and he'd given them a time. So I had no idea. And all I said was,
fake it till you make it.
Yes. And all I said was, well, I think tomorrow I've got a shot at my best time. Now, how quick was that? Because it was going to be my best time.
Well done.
I won before, so that wasn't lying.
That was a brilliant way to get out of Dodge.
So, yeah, the next day I finished third. And the American girl, Patty Catalano, ran an American record. Joan Benoit Samuelson, who eventually went on to win the first Olympic women's marathon in 84, she finished second.
Wow.
And I ran third in 33 minutes and 18 seconds.
That's
But then they're saying to me, well, my goodness, that's amazing. You just beat your PR by a minute. So that's when I got to know what Dick had said.
Good old Dick.
Yeah.
He got you in, got you started.
Yes, he sure did.
So the circuit in America, these road races were paid races. That was so did you start then to, earn a living out of this?
Oh, no, not at all. No. After that race, I got invited to go to stay with Jeff Galloway and his wife in Atlanta, Georgia. And Jeff had been an Olympian for the United States in the marathon, but it was all the 1980 boycott, so he hadn't got to go. So he had started up involved with the big Peachtree Road race in Atlanta, a 10K, and he just said, why don't you come and stay with us for a while, and we'll tell you what possibly is going to happen here in the United States. But up until then, there was nothing. You just ran the races and got a trophy.
Wow.
And so there was nothing. It was totally amateur. But there was the road race directors wanted the sport to go professional because they were tired of the under the table payments that they were having to give out predominantly to the men.
Yes.
And so they wanted it to change. And then Phil Knight, who was the founder of Nike, and Nike back then in 1981 was just a small group of officers in Oregon.
Wow.
Nothing like it is now. And they were making the shoes in a little factory in Oregon. And Phil Knight wanted to put up, he wanted the sport to change too, because obviously he's producing running shoes, but he can't use the runners he can't sponsor the runners. It's completely illegal.
Yep.
So anyway, it was just amazing how they put me up in their homes. I went and ran some other races. I got given $100 at a time to go talk in a running shoe store.
Wow.
People were just amazing. The hospitality, how enthusiastic they were to create this road racing circuit and make it professional. Well, you were going to be up against United States Track and Field, which back then was called the Athletics Congress. And so everybody who wanted to run in a road race had to be a member of the Athletics Congress. So they had a real hold on the sport, and they wanted to keep their hold on the sport.
I'll bet.
That led to the Olympic Games, and no one
Yep.
wanted the Olympic Games to be professional. So there was going to be a huge battle ahead. So in June of 81, I turned up in Portland, Oregon to race a 15-kilometer race. And there was going to be $10,000 first prize, a total of $50,000 spread between the men and the women's field.
Wow.
The greatest thing that happened was that there was going to be equal prize money immediately.
Amazing.
Equal prize money for
Still
male
not
and
better than
females.
most
They did it.
things.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it's the first sport.
Wow.
The first thing, first
Cool.
professional race, they made it equal immediately. So I give them all credit for that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be $10,000 first prize. And I had no money left. In fact, I was pretty much 2 weeks away from packing up and quitting.
Wow.
And
That's
going
crazy.
to England.
Yeah.
2 weeks away. So I went there, and they had a big meeting the night before, and they got us to sign documents to say that if we finished in the top 10 the next day, would we or wouldn't we accept the prize money? And did we understand what the consequences were going to be, and that there was going to be a big battle ahead? And so I was all in, because I traveled
What
in
did you have to
Europe.
lose?
I didn't have anything to lose, and I
Exactly.
thought if I finished 5th or 6th, I'd earn enough money to stay a little bit longer, to see what I could do.
Yep.
And I'd also traveled in Europe with our guys on the European track circuit in the 70s, and I'd seen all the under the table money.
Wow.
So I just thought I deserve it too. If I can earn money out of my talent, then I want the same chance. And so the next day, you know, that good old running style I had, it was 15 kilometers, and it was 5 miles uphill and 4 miles down.
Wow.
And I just got into the rhythm going up the hill and realized that I was just running so much easier than the others. And so I just went for it. And I got to the top of the hill, and I was quite a way in front. And I thought, oh boy, all I have to do is get down this hill and I've won, you know. And so I did win, and I get $10,000. And the moment I crossed the finish line, I'm in all sorts of trouble, because I'm only in the United States on a visitor's visa.
Oh, gosh.
And that's illegal to have accepted the money.
Oh,
You've got
gosh.
the United
That as
States
well.
tax folks there. And then I immediately get a lifetime ban from the sport. I've even still
How
got
crazy.
I've still got the telegrams from the New Zealand Amateur Athletic Federation, as it was then. So anyway, you know, my parents were devastated. They just thought, you know, you've really messed up your life. But
Brave.
you know, it was, I was 25 years old. And
You've got to make a living.
I got to make a
Giving
living.
your life to this.
And so the beauty of it was that the United States road race directors ignored the ban. So I raced again in another 5 days at the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta. And I went on to continue road racing that year. And at the end of 81, I'd earned $22,000 in prize money. I'd also got a Nike contract, which has since been proven, because of this documentary being done this year, that I am the legitimate first female runner to sign with Nike. Brilliant. And it was three days after that race, and I worked out a contract on a table napkin at an ice cream store in Atlanta, and it was for $400 a month.
Wow.
$400 a month, and I thought I just won the lottery.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So,
and how did you get around the
changed
tax?
my life.
How did you get around the tax stuff with the US government tax
Well,
stuff?
there was an agreement between New Zealand and the United States where you can choose. I mean, it took a lot because I was in trouble immigration-wise as well. So I had all of that to work out. and so, you have to get a tax ID. So I chose at that point to become an American taxpayer.
Yep.
And so, and I have been ever since. And so, and then I had to deal with the immigration. So at the end of 81, I pretty much was deported. I was told to go back to New Zealand, go to the United States Embassy and work out what status I needed to be able to come back to the United States. And so, it was absolutely crazy time. And just because, as I said, of this documentary being done, I had to relive all of it, get out my scrapbooks and all the articles and everything and the headlines, and you just go, oh boy, it really shook up my life and the whole sport.
Yeah, but it takes a brave soul to do something like that. And of course, now we take that all, for granted that's how it's all gone. But, someone has to be the first and someone has to take that brave step. And it's ridiculous, like you're dedicating your life to your sport, and why can't you make a living from it? I always thought it was ridiculous anyway, and I was only a kid back then, but and it pioneered the way.
Well, I remember after it happened was that, rugby, the All Blacks were amateur, and I remember some conversations where the All Blacks were just, how come a bunch of female runners are getting paid and we can't? So I think it shook up a lot of sports. I mean, it certainly changed track and field. It changed the Olympic Games. It opened up look at what's happening now, even here in the collegiate system here in the United States. They're now allowing the college athletes to have sponsorships agreements. I just read where the gals, the rugby sevens, the Black Ferns are going to be allowed, to kind of be paid so they don't have to have jobs and try to be athletes at the same time.
Yeah, because
I read the comments on that, and I just thought, I'm a perfect example of becoming good as an amateur and becoming great the moment I was able to be a full-time athlete. I'm a perfect example of that. There's no going backwards. And so all these people going, well, they should be doing it for the love of their country and so forth. Well, I did it for the love of my country, for 11 years, and I was almost lost.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I wouldn't be sitting here with another 11 years of even better accomplishments if I had not been professional.
Yes, and it's just to me, it's just a ridiculous argument if you're going to see, because you have to dedicate your entire life to this if you want to be really good. Of course, my sport is a really a weirdo sport, right? We're ultramarathoning, we're a bunch of eccentric weirdos who run around. And my dream was to represent New Zealand just once, so
yes.
And I spent years and I tried it with different sports and I failed, and my dad was really keen for me to represent New Zealand. It took me till I was 42, and on my 8th attempt of doing 24-hour races where you run around track for 24 hours, you'd have an idea of what that actually means, because that's
25 laps is as far as I've gone on it.
But at a hell of a speed, and when you're doing a 24-hour race, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. The qualification for the world champs was 185 Ks. It took me 8 attempts at failing at the 185 Ks, working up from 140 to 160, then finally. And on this one day, I managed to do 194.3 kilometers in 24 hours at the age of 42 before I represented New Zealand. And you know what? The New Zealand Athletics Association told us, after all of that effort, not only will we have to pay everything to go to the world champs, but they banned us from going to the world champs. They wouldn't let us go, even though I'd finally qualified. That was gutting. That was gutting. And I got to go to the Commonwealth champs, and we didn't even get a singlet. I know our sport is not a mainstream sport, but when you put 20 years effort into getting there, and this is only, this is only 10 years ago. That's shit, in my opinion. When you've given so much, and when your sport is a brutal sport. I mean, to run 194 Ks in 24 hours is pretty bloody, extreme. It's a shame, And I did that once, and I got the silver fern, and I gave it to my dad, and he stuck it on his wall, and that was me done. That was me done from that. And in a very much smaller way than you, I pioneered a little bit of a wave for ultra marathoning to make a living, right? So I managed to make a living from my sport for a number of years, and through sponsorships and through,
Yes.
and I also learned to, market myself, speak, present, get
Yes.
teams on board, all of these things that you learn in order to just get enough to survive. Now, it was by no means was, I going to be rich, but the North Face were my sponsors for many years. But then lots of other companies like Toyota and so on who had come in and sponsored various things, and some local firms like Taranaki Engineering, and just enough to get through.
Yes.
And so you paved the way not only for the mainstream sport, but also for the little sports like that, to make it to find a way to go, no, okay, there is no path. I'm going to pioneer a path. I'm going to make one happen.
Yeah, who knew? To be honest, you took a chance. I trusted the people that were involved. Phil Knight put up the money to hire all the legal. Where it really cost me is I had to hire an immigration lawyer.
Wow. Yeah.
That's, because I needed somebody here in the United States to be helping me while I was down in New Zealand, and then, to get the proper visa. And I was one of the first where they established this H-1B visa, which is now what all the sports people from around the world are coming into the United States on, because it allows them to come in here and earn the prize money here in the United States. It's a special visa for that. And all those sorts of things had to come into play. Now, the ban in terms of, the fact that I even got to go to the Commonwealth Games, I have no time. The New Zealand athletic powers that be were not helpful. They've kind of got an alternative version of this story, which is very interesting, because they kind of got some claims now on the timelines of things, where I go back through my scrapbooks and they're trying to say they reinstated us like in August of 81, but I've got headlines that say, oh no, weren't reinstated until February of 82.
Yeah.
So, they got a revisionist history of the timeline, and oh no, they supported. Oh no, they were right, but no,
I can quite believe it. I can quite
they
believe
weren't.
it.
And so they made it hard. I didn't get reinstated until a week before I raced in Brisbane in the Commonwealth Games.
Wow.
I flew to Brisbane not knowing whether I was going to be reinstated in time to run.
Wow, this is crazy, eh? Yeah, I can truly believe that. There's a lot of bureaucrats in places like that shouldn't be there. Probably never run themselves.
Well, and
even.
it's still happening though.
Yeah.
I follow the some of the athletes that really should have been, at the Olympics, or how do you grow athletes if you don't give them a chance when they're young?
Yep.
Look at the chances I got at 17 and 18 and 19, 20, being in New Zealand teams, got so much experience on the world stage at such a young age. And now they're making it so hard, where you've kind of got to be way, way up there to get on a New Zealand team. But how do you get to be that good if you're not given the opportunity to grow and experience while you're young?
Yes.
It's just doesn't make sense. I read it. I follow everything still.
Yeah,
that's
I think
going on.
We've both got a bit of a beef with that. some of the things that happen, and the way some athletes are treated, and there's a lot of stuff that's not so great. But then you went on to do the Commonwealth Champs, and from there on in, you qualified for the Olympics 6 times. And you have world records. Let's just go over some of your achievements, because they're pretty, phenomenal.
Well, I set the world record in the 5,000 meters at Mount Smart Stadium, and that was the first time I'd ever raced the 5,000 meters on the track.
Wow.
And then the following, in October of 82, I got the gold medal. My best year was 1982. I went undefeated here in the United States and broke the course records of every single race that I ran in. So there's the difference. You really think, in 81, I was 2 weeks away from being gone from the sport. And in 82, I had a world record, a gold medal, and was unbeaten. So there's the difference my decision made in my life. The other big
Huge.
decision I made at the end of 80 was to quit with my first coach and join my second coach, John Davies. So I'm be very remiss if I don't add him to the equation of the two decisions I made. First was to change coaches, and secondly was to come to the United States and make the decision to turn pro. And it gave me another 11 years.
Wow.
Gave me another 11 years. I mean, it was, I qualified for 72. I went in 76. I qualified for Moscow. There was the boycott. I went in 84 and ran the marathon because there was nothing for me in 84. It went they didn't put the 5 and 10,000 meters into the Olympics in 84.
Really?
They went all the way to the marathon.
Oh, wow. I didn't know
So
that.
women didn't get full equality in the Olympic Games until Atlanta in 96.
Wow.
It wasn't until 96 they put the 5,000 meters in. So I lost my window of opportunity in the 5 and 10,000 meters. And then in 88, I mean, I think 84 would have been my time in the Olympic Games if the 5 and 10,000 meters had been put in.
Wow.
I went to Seoul in 88, but I was 34 years old then.
Yeah.
34, 30, yeah. So anyway, and I finished 11th in the final in Seoul, but I think 84 would have been my opportunity.
You have a very short window.
And then I qualified for Barcelona, but I was just tired of the. I retired at the end of 92.
Yeah.
At
the age of 36. Yeah.
36. Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't retire because of the physical side. I actually retired because of the mental.
Yeah.
Because I'd had 22 years and I really had stayed very healthy. So it was 22 very intense years of not only running the second 11 years of running the American road racing system. And speaking of New Zealand selectors, they would never recognize anything I did here in the United States. I had to come back to New Zealand and run in a New Zealand track season to run qualifying times. So I was competing year round.
Oh, wow. So at 36, I mean, you've been luckily with injuries. You hadn't had anything after your leg surgery as a teenager. But mentally, there comes a point, doesn't there, when you go, I remember reading somewhere, you were no longer nervous. And to you, that was a sign that actually you're no longer in the game, your head's no longer in the game. And even though you
lost my focus. Yes. I'd lost the discipline and the focus. Yeah. And I was starting to cut corners. Yeah. And I knew that would bring bad results, and I would sit in a hotel room and I wouldn't be nervous anymore. And I thought, I'm just taking this for granted now. I'm just going through the motions. Yeah. And integrity wise, it was a matter of, I'm not going to take the money from these race directors just because of who I am and go to these races and not perform, but just take the money. Yeah. I could have done that. Could have got a few more years. Long time. And I just thought, these race directors have become my friends. I'm not going to do that. It's just not right. Yeah. So I got out on top, and it was the right thing to do, and never once did I regret it. That's brilliant. I love that. And did you in the transition from being this elite athlete? I know many athletes, including me, have struggled with the end of their time and moving on into other things in their lives. How was that for you, that transition out? Once I made the decision, I honestly think my coach and family had a harder time. They didn't believe me. John basically said I just needed 6 months sabbatical and I'd be back. Yeah. But I was such a fierce competitor that I knew I was done. Yeah. So it was really easy. It was not a problem whatsoever. And I mean, I was pretty secure money-wise so that I could make a decision what I was going to do next. And my big decision was I going to come back to New Zealand, or was I going to stay here in the United States? And to be really honest, I'm actually a pretty private person, and I made the decision that if I go back to New Zealand, I'm going to be a figurehead in New Zealand for the rest of my life. Yeah. And that's be a big fish in a small pond. I wasn't sure that I I wanted to do that. And so I stayed here. I knew I could go back to New Zealand anytime I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I was based out in Boise, Idaho, and that's where I trained. And I got asked to bring a big event to Boise. Would I help found a big event? And I did. And in 1993, I founded what eventually became the largest women's only event in the United States.
Wow, cool.
So I did that. I switched and put my passion into building something. So that was easy. So that was only like a year later that I started putting my passion into that. And I wanted women of all shapes and sizes and abilities and ages to participate in a 5K. So it was like I took my story and then used it as a platform to encourage women of all ages to come out and participate in a 5K.
Wonderful.
So it was a pretty quick changeover.
Yep.
And so, so that part made it easy too.
And how have you transitioned? Like, so what have you done? Have you remained in the sport since that time? And, in the years since, how has your career developed from there?
Well, similar to yours, actually, speaking. I was a former school teacher, as I said. So a lot of what I did when I went to events, Nike always wanted you to have your platform, and my platform was always to go into schools and speak. So I continued doing that at events that I had raced. Race directors would bring me back, even after retiring. So I did that. The event in Boise took up enormous amounts of my time and energy. So yes, got into speaking and then continuing with the
stayed
event.
in that whole
yes.
in that space right up until now. And I've seen you in a doco that was played on New Zealand TV, and I've forgotten the name of it now, but you were featuring in it, and I can't remember the name for the life of me now.
Was it the spin-off? The documentary is it's only about 14 minutes long.
Yes. It was the shortest one on your story. That was an interesting story. And your name is, like, when I was growing up, you, like Rod Dixon, Dick Quacks,
Don Walker.
Yeah, of course, and Lorraine Moller and
Alison
Rowe, who I've been chasing for an interview. Alison, if you're listening, I need to get you on. All of these were your heroes. They were the stars of the track and field world. Some names that I grew up with. So it's a real honour to meet you today, and I've really enjoyed our chat. What do you think? Is what did you actually learn out of your sport? What like when I look back at the stuff that I did, and even the hard failures and the crap that you went through, what did it teach you for life, and how have you carried that forward into your life?
Well, I think in terms of what we've all had to deal with the last 2 years, it was the easiest thing for me to deal with. Because I think the discipline and the lifestyle that I had to live as a professional athlete is you don't do this, you don't do that, you stay away from people who are sick, you live a very focused, disciplined, quiet, calm life where you've just focused on your own health. I didn't have a problem going through what we've had to go through. And, here we were locked down as well. Forget how long it was. But we were able to, I could still go out and exercise in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I could still get outdoors. But in terms of the simplicity of life, that part was the easiest. I mean, I had friends and they were going around, they were just going out of their minds because they did not know what to do with their time. And so for me, it was just absolutely easy because I put myself back into professional athlete mode. Exercise, eat, sleep, read, go out in the yard, whatever. But it was really easy. And I think if you can learn to live a very simple life, which we do learn, we learn to live a very disciplined, focused, but also a very simple life as professional athletes, that if you can learn to do that, that's one of the greatest gifts that you get, because so many people just need so much to keep them occupied and entertained. And that's what I learned through all of this, is I watched a whole bunch of people just go nuts because they just didn't have all their stuff going on in their lives, and they didn't know how to manage that.
Yeah, very, very good point. And bringing things back down to basics is probably a good lesson for us all. And I think, you know, what's come out for me out of there's many aspects, and, you know, some of them not so great, but I think the things that you value, you know, what's important to you, like family and slowing the whole pace of life down. And, you know, like we're not being able to travel, we're not being able to do all of those sorts of things anymore. And sometimes, you know, you think, oh gosh, it would be nice to hop on a plane and go somewhere for sure.
Well, I'm desperate to get back. I mean, this is the longest I've never been. I've always managed to get back to New Zealand once a year. So now we're looking at maybe 2023 because, you know, my husband has to be able to get the time off to be able to come and spend the amount of time in New Zealand that we usually do. So we can't plan for 2022. So that'll be 3 years, you know. And I mean, and I miss New Zealand. There's a lot of times where people think, you know, I'm here because, well, you know, the United States and whatever, she's living in the United States. I miss New Zealand. It just happened to be that life brought me here.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I met my husband and he's born and bred in the town I'm living in. This is his hometown.
Yeah.
And so that's where life took me. That's where you made your life. That doesn't mean I don't miss New Zealand terribly.
That's nice to hear. And we would love to have you back. Because it is nice. And, you know, it's a changed place. It's not as pleasant as it was. Things are pretty rough over here at the moment, and we're all struggling with what's going on, but let's hope that things open up, and you know, things are meant to be opening up from next month to a certain degree, but it's very, very hard, like you say, to plan anything because you don't know if it's going to have the rug pulled out under you.
And I see all that too, and I see all the comments, and I would just like New Zealanders to really understand the state of Indiana is similar population to New Zealand. We are a state that did not follow the rules just because of the governance here and the party that runs the state. We are at almost 1.5 million cases and almost 60,000 deaths, and we're only 52% vaccinated. So we are still, those of us who are sane enough to have got vaccinated and done the right thing, are still living in an area where only half of us are vaccinated. The COVID is still raging in our small town that I live in. And we've still got people dying every week. We've still got hospitals full of COVID patients in the ICUs. So I read New Zealand and I look at your vaccination rate and I just think, God bless you all for doing what you did. It will all end, and New Zealand will come out of it so much better than what we are here in the United States.
Wow, it's interesting to get different viewpoints on it. Look, Anne, you've been really lovely to talk to today, and I've really enjoyed your insights into your career, your incredible achievements. You've definitely been a role model for women and for women from New Zealand in the running scene. So thank you very much for your time and your incredible career. And I wish you all the best. And I look forward to seeing this doco that's coming out shortly.
Yeah, hopefully this year sometime. And it's been a long time coming because I don't think people really realize if it wasn't for a small group of runners on that day in 1981, Michael Jordan and the Dream Team would never have been in Barcelona.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you very much for your time today.
You are welcome.